e.c., we have the entity in those relations with the universe and universal forces, as are latent and exhibited in the present entity. Well has the entity been named, for through the entity's forces will come much joy to many peoples, provided there are those precautions taken respecting tram or streetcar. These to the entity have an attraction that would be well to be careful of, that misfortune comes not through these channels. Especially in the 7th, 11th and 13th year of present experience. In entering the Earth's plane, astrologically speaking, we find the entity coming under the influence of Venus with Mercury, Jupiter with Venus, and Uranus. Hence we find one that, during the young and adolescent age in the present experience, will be called, thought, felt to be one beyond its years in experience and expressions. One well developed of body, mind, and ever purposeful in its actions. One that it will be more than well to answer as near as is possible the questions concerning self's relation to individuals, groups, classes, or in every respect of social, domestic, or economic conditions, and answer these correctly, explaining the meaning as much as lies within the power of those to whom this trust of this period has been given. In the influence astrologically, and as of urges as are latent, and will be seen to develop as urges and inclinations, and these urges and inclinations may be in a measure guided so as to become more or less a portion of the being itself, by those responsible for the moral and spiritual welfare of the developing entity through this present experience in the Earth's plane, for we see the entity as a developing physical relationship entity at this period of experience, in the control, one that may be reasoned with, but rarely commanded without reason given for such command. One that may be loved into doing or becoming that as would guide the entity, and rarely forced, either by circumstance or by conditions, to adhere to principle or to precept without that of love being shown or manifested in the directing. One that, with Jupiter and Uranus influence, will be found to be exceptional in abilities toward those arts, or elements of life that go to make up the characteristics of the developing personality as manifested in the present experience. Here, as a side note, may be given, there is manifested in this entity that which may perfectly illustrate the difference between personality and individuality, as the individual with urges must be directed. Those of exceptional abilities with Uranian influence may be well said also to mean exceptional abilities to err, or to be led astray in the direction not best for self or self's development. One with the ability to be exceptional as a musician. One that may use this same ability to entice, overpower, to subdue, to subjugate others to the power, unless guided, directed, and loved into the correct idea of the use of power in any and all directions. One whose abilities lie especially in two fields, as will be seen from the appearances in the Earth's plane and the effect each has upon the present entity and the abilities of same. Much might be said concerning development or abilities of the entity that are seen through that has given. This is not all of it, by any means, but, in appearances, in the one before this we find in that period in France, when there was the rule under Richelieu, the entity then of the ruler's household, among those who served that sovereign in entertainment in its better sense, being one administering to the needs of those held in high esteem by the sovereign or ruler, and attendant to same during illness. In the name Magati, and the entity gained through this experience, ministering to the needs of many, and in service found pleasure rather than that of hardship, finding the way, the means, to often comfort the disconsolate, the sad, the weak, strengthening the broken-hearted, and ministering to the physical bodies of many. In the urges will be seen from this experience, comes both good and bad, as is seen by that as has been given. The innate desire to ever help those that are ill, or the nurse, or the administering angel, and it were, to many, yet desiring ever a high position for self in that administering. See? In the one before this we find in the land now known as Persia, the entity then among those of the school that were destroyed by the invaders from the now Arabian and Egyptian country. The entity was one that was loved by the king's daughter, and one that gave self rather than see that friend fall into the hands of the invaders, yet prevented it not. Gaining, then, in this experience, and true may it be said of this entity, a love child. In the name Ibsia. In the urge seen from this experience, again good and bad, that of the urge to be slow in making friendships, yet when once made the entity gives all in the defence or succour of same. In the one before this we find in the country now known as Egypt, the entity in the period when divisions were between what would be termed now as church and state, or the founding of communistic ideas from which much of the Christian era thought was builded. The entity then the musician in the king's household, and a favourite of both kings, and a musician of note, especially upon stringed instruments. And the entity gained and lost through this experience. In the urge seen, that of the critic, rather, of music, yet the ability to apply same may be brought to the forefront of this experience. In the name Idla. In the one before this in the land known as Bozida, in the temple of that peoples. The entity again the musician, and sounds of all natures were produced upon the instruments of the day. While this peoples, as to material conditions, reached even a higher state of application of material things, hence called civilization, than even of the present day. Yet the application towards material surmounted toward the spiritual, though a form of worship was maintained through the period, and the entity was among those worshipped by the peoples of a portion of the land. In the name Eli. In this experience the entity lost through the self-aggrandizement, or selfish motives. In the urge again may be seen that love of power over others, that may be attained or maintained through abilities of self-surpassing others. This, guided correctly, may be made worthwhile. Let run without consideration, may bring that of self-condemnation when gone to seed. In the abilities of the present entity, we find either that of the musician or the nurse, the administrator of ideas, either through service or through the instrument, guide and direct the entity aright, and job, peace and comfort, will come to many through the efforts of the entity. Give these as the first principles that must be builded upon by the entity throughout the experience. Seek first the Lord while he may be found. And when the entity has grown in years in this experience, the entity will not depart from same. We are through.